What
engine's in that?
It's a 1985 KX 500 motocrosser.
Oh wow. Are you selling it?
No chance.
No. Guess that's a big key for that one, isn't it?
Yeah, until my dying day.
Have a good day, pal.
That.
I'm saying that. Have we got some drink in there underneath?
Gracias.